Hello, my friends, and welcome back to this episode that I am calling The Plans of Mice and Men. Or maybe all I do is lose, lose, lose. Or maybe, oops, I did it again. Or maybe just keep swimming. I can't decide because my life is too chaotic. It's a good thing that the gospel isn't. I am Rev Kev Nev, and this is the Mishmash Gospel. Welcome, guys, to episode 3 to the Mishmash Gospel, the simple truth for the chaotic life. And I am here in Herkimer, New York. This is the second time I've been to Herkimer, New York, but I have a big story about it. Now, the plans of mice and men, because this is not the episode I planned to do. I planned to sit down and talk to my wife, Christy Neville. We're going to do that next episode. But I found myself here in Herkimer, New York, so this was a great time to read to you the story I wrote in Tales from Jesus Land called Herkimer. Let's dive in and I hope you enjoy it. It's called Herkimer, and the subtitle is 2 lengthy morality tales, 1 classic ending, and 0 lessons learned. Tale 1, we'll start with Tale 1. It's entitled A Healthy Choice. I bought a map of the United States, a highlighter, and a pair of running shoes. I was finally motivated enough to start, and it came from the most unlikely of places. Putting down a short story from one of my favorite authors, my mind swam with both conviction and not just a small dose of worry and some large servings of inspiration. The short story in question was a supernatural thriller about an overweight man. The protagonist, Doctor, spelled out the grim realities of how a middle-aged life of a fat man could become. The protagonist in the story went out and bought a stationary bike, cleared off a work area, put a map up on the wall. The map was one that spanned the distance from his house to an obscure little village in upstate New York named Herkimer. Every day he progressed pedaling on his virtual journey, following this point on the map, and found some real-life journey into fitness. Well, that wasn't the point of the story, but definitely was my point. If he, knowing that he's nothing more than a figment of somebody's imagination, could do it, then why couldn't I? A point of illogical logic, I guess. I still use it to this day. Well, at the time I was living in upstate Louisiana, and it was a fair hike all the way up to upstate New York, but why not? Who cares if it takes me a year, or 5 years, or 10 years? Let's just get started. I wasn't interested in getting a stationary bike, but I've always wanted to become a runner. So I mounted a map of the United States on my wall. I mapped out the routes between West Monroe, Louisiana, and Herkimer, New York. It was 1,439 miles. Then I laced up my shoes and I launched myself into the world of fitness. Now, I obviously wasn't going to run to Herkimer. I was going to virtually keep track of how much I ran until I finally made it to Herkimer. I became a runner. Soon enough, I was entering the virtual limits of Jackson, Mississippi. And then I started up the path, the Natchez Trace Trail, because I wanted to take the scenic route, heading towards Nashville. Every week I went on. Some weeks I progressed a lot and were great. Some weeks were miserable. Some weeks nothing happened at all. But bit by bit, I was progressing slowly up the map of the United States towards my goal. I started to share with my wife a daydream I started to have. One day, and who knows when, one day I'm going to be on Highway 90 between Syracuse and Albany, finally closing in on the last few miles of my goal to the Herkimer town limit. What if I worked it out that for that day we made a family trip up. Now, we came to this area because I would go visit my parents in Ontario, so we came close to it. So what if we actually, to finish it, do the last few miles where I actually be dropped off a few miles away from the town of Herkimer's town limits. How awesome would it be if I finished my journey by running victoriously into the town, past the Herkimer sign, with all my friends and family cheering me on, to finish my virtual journey with a physical victory. It was a beautiful dream. And I wish I could tell you it was a dream come true. But I cannot. I cannot because in many ways I'm a lazy man. The running continued. I ran many, many years after that, but life got in the way. We moved, and then we moved again. The map came with us a number of these times, but got updated less and less. Finally, a couple moves afterwards, it never got unpacked, and it became lost in obscurity and out of this tale forever. So I never ran victoriously into the small town of Herkimer, New York. It's a sad thing, but I'm happy to say it's not a tragic thing. The map was never completed, but the motivation found a way into my heart. No, I never became a world-class die-hard runner, but I ran for many years and ran half marathons and triathlons, and even though I don't run anymore, I'm getting older. I mean, these hurt. I'm actually, ironically, on stationary bikes, and I keep working at it slowly, mile after mile after mile. In fact, at the writing of this, I was just reaching my 2,000th mile. So if you figure out, that would be all the way into Herkimer and then back all the way to Columbus, Ohio. So that's a great milestone at the time of this writing. I also began working on the Appalachian Trail, 2,200 miles, working our way towards Katahdin. In fact, one time when I began working out, I bought a map of the Appalachian Trail. I put it up on my wall, and I bought a pair of hiking boots. Some people just never learn. So now, tale 2, an unhealthy choice. I'm not a smoker. Never have been really tempted to be, in fact, to be honest. It was just not an attractive proposal to me as a young man. And I didn't want to deal with the price of buying them and the threat of dying a horrid death. There was always an effective deterrent for me. However, one thing did always tempt me. See, my grandfather used to smoke a pipe, and I to this day associate that musk, witchy smell with Christmas morning, cored lands around warm fireplaces, and loving family. My hero smoked pipes. The romantic in me dreamed of sitting around a village pub decorated with rough-hewn wood and deep mahogany inlays, discussing faraway lands with the likes of C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien, where a lit chimney belched a decadent smoke from our mouth. Yet, I don't, because, like I said earlier, I'm lazy. So much work would have to go into a pipe. You'd have to buy the tobacco, learn to light it, learn to smoke it, clean it with your Swiss Army knife, and then do it over and over again. It's just too much trouble. So, until one day when I get less lazy, I will remain smoke-free. More or less. I say more or less because there was one small exception. You see, I was always enamored by the culture of cigar smoke too. My mind associates that with manly undertaking of scattered leathered high-backed chairs around large fireplaces with large hand-roared stogies glowing with rosy embers lighting up a cloudy room. That might sound unattractive to you, but it has always held an air of intrigue to me. A smoky, slightly nauseating air, if you will. So a number of years ago, I had an idea. Being strongly self-motivated, I decided to try a cigar. I couldn't do anything like that alone. I discussed this matter with my friend Jason. We decided that we would buy one and smoke it on the way to the Appalachian Trail for our yearly trip. I was in Rochester, and we began the road trip to Boston. We'd pick up our friend Aaron. We'd head off to the trail. And every year I looked forward to this reuniting. So once a year, it began a mark of the dangerous business of walking out my front door. So I thought this would be a fun tradition if we smoked a cigar on the way just before we got into the car to start this adventure. So I got some advice from a cigar smoking friend. He told me not to start with anything too exotic, not to start with anything too rich, that there was a learning curve. He taught me how to clip the end. He taught me how to light it. He educated me on the proper way to hoard it and to puff it out and not breathe it in. And one more thing he said. He said, you're not used to nicotine in your system at all. What you really need to look out for is how it will affect you. Now, it's very common that it would make you nauseous and dizzy. Often people will throw up the first time that they have one. So he said, my advice to you is this. Buy a reasonably priced one and only smoke half of it. Trust me on this. Well, so the trip began. I went into Rochester with my friend to the Cigar Emporium, and to my delight, it was furnished just as I imagined it would be. Leather-clad high-back chairs, a number of old-timers sat around talking about what I imagine must have been the outrageous prices of spice in the Asian market, a new batch of teas imported from mysterious regions of South America, how the hunting safaris into the dark continent went. But the room reeked of a dense, foggy cloud that both repelled and enticed me. Speaking briefly to the proprietor, we went for a walk into his humidor, selected a recommended house brand, clipped the end, paid for it, and began our road trip. And the adventure was upon us. So we smoked our cigars, we spoke of deep truths, lost dreams, spiritual realities, and lofty principles. I expected to like the cigar, but I was rather unprepared for the fact that I would simply love it. It turned out to be everything I desired. This could be dangerous, I thought, and I held up the smoke to my mouth and savored the rich aroma. Before I knew it, time had passed and I looked down. Half the cigar was gone. I remembered the words of my friend. Don't overdo it. Only smoke half. You don't know how it's going to affect you. Put it out and be safe. But you know what? I felt fine. No. In fact, I felt great. This was all I had wished for. The open road stretched before us, this cigar being smoked and enjoyed. In fact, I kept smoking it until it became a stub. What a wonderful experience. What a wonderful experience. I seemed to have, maybe my constitution was just stronger than others. Maybe I had an ironclad constitution. I was clearly built for great things. This prideful bragging continued for the next 20 minutes until I slowly began to feel slightly queasy. The thing about feeling a slight bit queasy, slight bit becomes rather. I was rather queasy, and that always becomes quite a bit queasy. That's what I was. So I mentioned to my friend, and he laughed at me, mocking me and my not so ironclad constitution after all. I laid back in my chair and I tried to will myself to the place to let this queasy feeling pass. Let us take a moment right now in this progressive dialogue to admit that we know the direction that this story is going in. At this point of the narration, I would simply say, I tried to will myself into letting the feeling pass. I wish I could say that it did, and that I had a wonderful time for the rest of the trip. Well, you might feel happy for past Kevin if that was the case. You would be understandably disappointed in present Kevin as a storyteller and a protagonist in this story. It's not a matter of the story ending messy. The question is, how messy is it going to get? Well, chalk it up to the fallen state of humanity, but let's at least acknowledge this about yourself, and I hope not to disappoint you. I progressed through the stages of queasy. Slightly, mildly, decidedly, shockingly. I went from the moment you feel you might vomit to the point you realize that you could choose to vomit if you wanted to, into the inevitable knowledge that you will be throwing up, hurling, blowing chunks. I told my friend this and instructed him to be prepared to pull the car over to the side of the road upon command. And immediately after I gave him that command. Now, I wish I could tell you that we stopped the call in time. I wish I could tell you that I neatly expelled my recent lunch in a lonely bush, wiped my mouth, continued down the road with most of my pride intact. But again, it wouldn't be much of a story if I did. Instead, let me say that as I signaled my friend, and he started to pull over to the side of the road, I decided to start the party a little early. Now, the floor was covered, the door handle, that little map pocket was now filled up in a manner that it was not designed to be filled up with. The door frame was splattered, and I finally managed to open the door with the vehicle still moving and launched myself onto the gravel shoulder in the high grass beside the road. My ghastly trail, which was marked by the conclusion of my first expedition to a smoker's ward, finally ended in a few spasms of unspeakable foulness there on the side of the road in the middle of this great adventure. Panting and in slight shock, I wiped my mouth and waited for the encore, or it did not disappoint. Finally, when I was sure I had emptied everything I had eaten over the past 12 months, I spat, I wiped my mouth, looked up at the two-legged sign looming before me, and my blood ran cold. A low, heartbreaking moan escaped my mouth as I reread the sign before me in sheer disbelief and disappointment. I blinked and I read it again. Didn't it just figure? There it stood in all its glory, and it simply read, "Welcome to Herkimer." So that was my first adventure into the town of Herkimer. Not as a glorious runner that made health-conscious choice, but rather a queasy person that learned that maybe cigars weren't a life choice for him. But it's been fun. I've been able to drive through the town finally, and I always will think of that town of Herkimer. I will always think of the plans of mice and men. So, that was a little bit of a lighthearted look at the fact that sometimes life just doesn't turn out the way we plan it. But, in the end, when we trust God, when we can have a sense of humor and don't take ourselves too seriously, good things happen. And speaking about the end, we have come to the end of this episode, so make sure you tune in next time where I finally get to sit down and have an interview with the beautiful Christy Neville in an episode that I am calling Jesus and the Hard Knock Life. Or maybe Never Fully Dead Without a Smile. Or The Good, the Bad, and the Crappy. Or Just Keep Swimming. I can't decide because my life's so chaotic right now, but it's a good thing the gospel isn't, and that is exactly what my life needs right now. So I'm Rev Kev Nev. Keep your cheese on your crackle.